If you have a true scary story that you'd like to hear featured on the channel, then go to mariesfield.com and send it my way. And of course, thank you. I have a hotel/lodging related story that I wanted to share because it was fairly creepy in my opinion. It wasn't really a hotel, it was a small bed and breakfast type place that was owned by a couple. When I booked this room, I was feeling down about things, having gone through a recent breakup, and I wanted to get away for a while. I assumed a nice weekend getaway to a quaint little bed and breakfast in a small town would be exactly what I needed to clear my head. This specific B&B looked like it was perfect. I booked the room and took the trip out to the house. When I got there, I immediately noticed a bit of a red flag about the guy that was checking me in. He saw me, and I quickly noticed that he was giving me this really weird, flirty stare. I'm going to assume that most of you out there will know what I mean. He was giving me this half smirk, and I could tell that he was staring at my chest for most of the conversation. Overall, he was a creep, but I assumed that he was probably just someone that worked for them to do check-ins. I followed through with giving them my info for the reservation, and that was when I was greeted by a woman, and she mentioned that she would take me to my room. On the way to the room, I asked her for the employee's name at the front desk because I was planning on talking to the owner about him, and she answered with, "The guy that checked you in? That's my husband. We're the owners." As soon as she said that, I just dropped it. I just smiled and nodded and said, "Oh, lovely." She showed me to my room, I set up shop, and just decided to let it go and move on. The man was a creep, sure, but I assumed that he wouldn't do anything other than be a creep from a distance and stare. It was uncomfortable, sure, but I wasn't going to let him ruin my weekend. I was here for me, and that was that. Sure, that was a bit ignorant, but again, this was a married man that co-owned a business, and I assumed that he wasn't going to pursue it any further. The first night was fine, and the first day was a really good time. I enjoyed a few places in town, and when I got back, I spent some time in my room working on some art on my laptop. It was a nice way to spend the afternoon and evening, and around 10 p.m., I decided I should go ahead and go to sleep. I put my laptop away, got dressed for bed, and turned off the light. Somewhere around 10 minutes or so after I got into bed, I started feeling like something was off. It was one of those, did I forget to do something? Or is something happening that I don't know about that I should moments? Like my instincts were saying something was up. I opened my eyes a bit and kind of shifted to look around the room, and as soon as I looked up over at the door, I noticed that it moved. I shot up out of bed and I nearly jumped to the door, pulling it open, and big surprise, on the other side of the door was the guy from the front desk, just standing there like a deer in the headlights. I asked him what the hell he thought he was doing, and he fumbled over his words for several moments before landing on, "I thought I heard a noise. I wanted to see if there was someone in there with you." I was nothing shy of livid at this point. I asked why the hell he thought he'd have the right to come into a customer's room like that in the middle of the night. He started getting defensive and telling me that it was against the rules to bring people into the room that weren't on the reservation, and started screaming at me about how he was going to kick me out. Right around this time, the other owner, his wife, stepped out of their room asking what was going on. This man seriously started shouting and saying that I had someone in my room, and then started screaming incoherently about how I was doing drugs in my room and that he saw me with a crack pipe. He was literally just throwing out everything he possibly could that made literally no sense. She looked at me bewildered, like she had no idea what was going on with her husband, and she then asked me what happened. I told her the truth, that I was in bed, looked up and saw my door open, and then when I got up and opened it, he was on the other side. She looked at me and then at him, and he was seriously bawling his eyes out and mumbling. She asked me if I wanted to stay the rest of the night, but said that if I wanted to leave, she would give me a refund for the room. It was pretty clear that she really didn't know how to handle this event. I told her that I would like to go ahead and get my stuff and go, and she nodded and said she would see me at the front desk in a few minutes. I went in and grabbed my clothes and backpack and went down to the desk, and the woman was incredibly apologetic. She mentioned that she has no idea why he did what he did, and I really think she was just in shock that something like this had happened. She did end up refunding me for the whole stay, and again mentioned that she was sorry. I accepted the apology, but mentioned that she needed to really deal with her husband, and she agreed. After that, I went ahead and stayed the night in a close-by hotel and just tried to put it all behind me. Was it creepy as hell? Yes. And could it have gone really bad, really quick, depending on what his intentions were? Absolutely. Honestly, I was just glad it was over and that I didn't have to think about it again. I obviously never went back, and I'm just hopeful that she got away from that creep of a husband, because he was most likely going to escalate at some point if he wasn't dealt with. Obviously, my self-care weekend was ruined, but it's alright. I moved on and got past all that, and life is better now anyways. Even though I am a bit iffy on staying anywhere other than large hotels. This happened to me as a young girl back in the early 90s. I was around 10 at the time and was the youngest with 2 older brothers. Needless to say, I was bored a lot. My brothers didn't want to play with me very much, unless it was something they wanted to do. Wrestling got old fast, especially when you have a disadvantage. So I was often found alone in my room, or complaining about being bored. The latter was a rare occurrence, because then I was told to find something to do or find your brothers. So you know how it goes. So when we had a new neighbor move in with a young girl around my age, I was ecstatic. I told my mom, and she agreed to let me pick out a treat to make for them and bring them over. I chose to make brownies, and my mom and I walked over there to meet them. It was the dad that answered the door. He shook our hands and we introduced ourselves, and then I asked about the little girl. He looked confused at first, but then replied with an, "Oh, yes, sorry," and hollered for her. For her privacy, I will call her Madeline. She seemed pretty shy at first. He brought her to the door and I told her my name and tried talking a little bit about herself to try to get her to loosen up. I did get her to smile and talk some, but then we parted ways and headed back home. I had big hopes. I wanted this girl to be my friend since she lived so close. We wouldn't have to ask our parents to give us rides, we could just be there. My mom told me to hold off so they could get settled in, and maybe I would see her in school. However, after not seeing her for a week, I told my mom, and she mentioned that she may still need to be enrolled, or maybe she was homeschooled. Sure enough, I would learn that she was in fact homeschooled when I saw her getting the mail one day. I was already out playing in the yard when I saw her and asked her about it. She said that she was in fact homeschooled as well, and that it was due to their beliefs. Being a kid and not really knowing what that entailed, I just accepted it and asked her to play. She said she would have to ask her dad first and ran back inside. After a few minutes of waiting in their yard, She came back out looking a little disappointed, but said that she couldn't play because they had things they had to do first. This seemed to happen a few times. I was starting to get upset, thinking maybe she didn't like me or want to hang out with me, so I slowly just stopped asking. That was until her dad came over to our place looking for me. He said he wanted to know if I wanted to come over for dinner and to hang out with Madeline, and I was ecstatic. I quickly jumped at the opportunity and followed him out the door and over to their place. I thought it was a little weird at first that he came over to ask instead of her, but it quickly dropped from my mind when I walked in their home. It was so colorful and organized. I know my reaction clearly showed on my face because her dad laughed and asked if I liked it. When I nodded, he said that Madeline had chosen a lot of the design. Since there wasn't a mother in the picture, she wanted her help in making it look womanly. The kitchen was yellow and seemed to have a bakery themed based on the framed pictures and utensils they had. The living room was a royal purple. It almost looked castle-like based on the furniture and fixtures. He told me I could have a seat at the table and that she would be out soon. He grabbed drinks for us, which was Kool-Aid for us and a beer for him, and then he sat at the table asking about myself. He asked what school I went to and if I liked it, what I was learning, what I liked to do, things like that. After some time, Madeline finally came out, wearing an apron and her hair up in a clip. I watched as she went to the kitchen, made not only her plate, but mine and her dad's plate, and brought them to us. Being a kid, I thought it was a little backwards, but then I just thought, well, she was trying to be polite with company, or maybe it was just a rule they had. Either way, it was a great spaghetti with garlic bread, and we just sat talking for a bit. Every so often, he would look at her and say things like, "She was telling me how she likes to bake too, honey," and would smile at her and she would do the same. After dinner, I tried getting up to take my plate to the sink when he insisted that they would get it, but instead, Madeline did, and as she did the dishes, we sat and talked more. Again, I thought it was weird and was curious, was the dinner for him or for her? But afterwards, we got to talk some more until I had to leave. I went home and my mom asked how it went, and I told her about everything. She laughed and didn't think much of it, joking that maybe she should consider doing that to us, but left it at that. We had a few more play dates where he would come over or call asking if I could or wanted to hang out with Madeline, and my parents would let me. It was always similar situations where any housework was done by her. He would ask me more about myself, and then we'd have some time to talk. Then, one weekend, I was invited over for her birthday party. This time, it was going to be a sleepover, so I thought for sure we would be able to have some time to ourselves. I packed a small bag with all my stuff I wanted to share with her and knocked on their door. Her dad answered, welcomed me in, and showed me to her room. All of the times I had been over, I hadn't even seen her room yet. That was the bedroom I dreamed of as a kid. It was painted pink. It had one of those huge white princess vanities, a normal-looking dresser, and then her closet was filled with dress-up items. Dresses, uniforms. There was a chest with jewelry, accessories, and shoes. It was every little girl's dream. Again, I'm sure it showed on my face because Madeline was smiling and her dad had laughed. He said this is what she wanted and his princess would get anything she wanted. Yeah, sure, my dad said I would always be his little girl, but my room didn't look like that. This was going to be fun. I asked about playing, but he said we had to have dinner first and we agreed. We made our way back to the dining room, and I noticed we were having something in a bowl. It was soup or chili or something like that. So she didn't have to make 2 trips. I stood up to grab my bowl when her dad politely told me not to, as it wasn't polite to make a guest serve themselves, and that it was her job as the lady of the house. Again, kind of weird, but I didn't question it and I sat back down. After we had dinner, I sat at the table and talked to him again as she cleaned up, and then we were finally able to go back to her room to play, as her dad said he would come in and check on us after a few. I thought of it like how parents do. Say they will, but don't until I got loud or if it was time for bed, something like that. However, not soon after we got to her room and we started talking about what we wanted to do, he came in asking what we were doing. Madeline said we were still deciding on what to wear. He almost looked as excited as I was as he stepped in the room going through her outfits. He was holding them up to me, making comments about how this would look great on me and this is perfect for my figure and so forth. After picking out a few things, he continued to stand in the room, so I asked if I could go to the bathroom to change. He then said it was fine and I could change in there with her. But the problem really wasn't her, it was him. My parents always stepped out of the room and wouldn't come in if I was changing. So the fact that he didn't even think to close the door or look the other way was weird to me. I was wearing shorts and a shirt, so I just decided to put it on over my clothes, whereas Madeline completely undressed. A little awkward, but I was too excited, so I let it go. Afterwards, we paraded around and pretty much played pretend, including her dad. He actually got on the ground, put a blanket on his back like a saddle, and had us sit on his back. He bucked around some, which was pretty funny though. Then he took pictures of both of us. After a while, we had cake and ice cream, and she opened a few presents that he had gotten for her. One of the things he got her was a nightgown of some sort. She thanked him for everything, and then he told her to try on the nightgown, so she did. And he asked me if I wanted to change too. I agreed and this time was able to go to the bathroom to do so. As we got ready for bed, Madeline took me back to her room where she set me up in her canopy bed. She then pulled out a blanket and pillow from her closet and laid them on the floor next to her bed. The bed was pretty big, so I told her she could sleep on it too, but she declined, saying she would sleep on the floor. For the first time, her dad came in and said goodnight, hugging both of us and shut the door. We were finally alone. She asked if I had a good time, and I told her I did, but being young and nosy, I asked her about doing all the work, and she said she had done that for as long as she could remember and as long as she could. I then asked her about her schooling, and she said that she just reads different books and does different workbooks. I was conflicted on that one because I thought that was super easy and you didn't have to get dressed. But then I was sad for her because other than myself, what other friends did she have? She couldn't go to school and show her friends a new outfit or talk about their favorite teacher, so I felt sorry for her. Other than that, she talked about the different states they lived and places they went to, which sounded pretty fun and kind of made me wish my family could travel around like that too. However, she did say that she liked the idea of my family, of everything I had told her, and she wished she had a mom to do things with. So I asked her about hers, and she said she didn't remember her and that she was just gone one day and she never saw her after that. Again, I was empathetic because I had a feeling one of two things happened there, and I couldn't imagine being without my mom. I was already really close to her. Shortly after, we ended up falling asleep, but I awoke sometime in the night having to go to the bathroom. Being that it was one of those awkward situations, I just laid there and slowly opened my eyes, and I saw a figure standing in the doorway. I didn't know if I was just seeing things or what, so I continued to lay there, pretending I was asleep, hoping it would disappear. After a few attempts of closing my eyes and reopening them, I saw Madeline get up from the floor and follow this figure out of the room. I waited for several minutes after that until I couldn't hold it any longer and quickly and quietly ran to the bathroom. Afterwards, I just went back to the bedroom and went back to sleep, acting like everything was normal. The next morning, I woke up to just me in the bedroom still. When no one came in after several minutes, I decided to get up and get dressed before anyone came in. Afterwards, I opened the door to look around when I heard noises coming from the kitchen. It was Madeline again, making breakfast. This time, her dad wasn't around, so I helped her make everything and she seemed to really have fun with it. Shortly after breakfast, though, I had to start packing up to go home. They both walked me to the door and said I was welcome over there any time and for however long I wanted to, and they both hugged me and I left. I went home to my mom in the living room and she asked me how it went. I was honest with her and told her it was fun, but her dad seemed very controlling and explained everything that happened, including the dress-up part. At first, my mom chuckled and said that maybe I just misunderstood something. She just said that maybe he was just very strict and to just keep being nice to Madeline because she probably needed a friend. However, I wasn't allowed to go back over there alone, my parents' choice. I wouldn't see her much longer after that year. You see, her dad bought her a small pool, and since they just had a chain link fence, everyone could see what was going on out there. The pool seemed more for a photo shoot. One thing I didn't mention was that my mom worked for the school board at the time, and as she put it when I was older, was curious about her schooling and tried talking with her dad about it one time. She tried to have her come over for dinner once, but he had to be there too. While we were watching TV, he came into the room and quickly rushed home. She told me that she was asking him what curriculum he was going through for homeschooling, and his answers were either vague or he avoided the questions entirely. My mom began to become concerned that she wasn't in school at all. Then summer came, and I tried asking my parents and Madeline's dad if she could go on a camping trip with me. That actually led to an argument between my dad and hers, and I didn't see Madeline for a long time after that. The next time I saw her was when there were two cops in the driveway, and they were both being escorted out, with her dad in handcuffs. My parents would only tell me that he wasn't a good person, and that Madeline was going to live with someone who would love her and take care of her. I wouldn't learn until years later as an adult what had actually happened. My mom, being around all different kids, could tell there was something different about Madeline in her relationship with her dad. Telling her about the party really set things off for her. Then my brothers told her about things they saw when they were out in the pool and even made suggestive comments to my brothers about her. With my mom confronting him about the schooling, she began to worry about it more. Then my dad had apparently said something to him, possibly threatening, I'm sure, which made him completely shut her out of my life. From there, they had visitors from CPS or something, and apparently, they found some things that weren't good either. I'm sure everyone can piece things together at this point, but knowing I was so close to this situation and alone was terrifying now that I'm an adult with a little girl of my own. There are things you are taught as a kid to be aware of, But there are some things that just don't feel right to you, and you don't know how to react. So all I'm going to say is teach your kids to trust their gut as well, because it could save them or someone else's life. I just hope Madeline was able to find a real, loving family. Hey everyone, longtime lurker in this group. Never posted because I've never really had anything that I thought was worth sharing. I've read a lot of stories here, and I honestly never thought that I was going to one day make a post, yet here we are. Sure, we've had our share of creeps at my work, but this one was above and beyond everything else. This happened only a few weeks ago, so the memory is still fresh in my mind, and honestly, I'm still a bit creeped out about it. I was working the night shift at my McBurgers, and yes, I'm calling it that because I don't want the real restaurant to see this and try to shut me down, and it seemed like a pretty normal night. To give some context, the McBurgers that I work at isn't in the best part of town. We've had our fair share of weird people and bizarre things happen, but honestly, it kind of feels like the people with ill intentions just leave our store alone. It's almost like our McBurger is a safe haven for them, so they know not to do the crazy things there. Like, we get the types that kind of look like they're going to commit a robbery, but they just order a burger and leave, and then wherever they go afterwards is who they hit. Well, unfortunately, on this night, we got a taste of the crazy. It was around 2 a.m., and we were mostly empty. I was manning the drive-thru window and doing some sweeping in the back area when we weren't getting any cars. Kevin, one of my coworkers, was manning the front, but due to lack of traffic, he was doing some cleanup on the line in other parts. After a bit of this, we heard the door open, and Kevin wrapped up what he was doing to head up to the front and greet the customer. I watched him go up and looked around and then come back saying that there was no one there and shrugging it off. He went back to cleaning, and about 5 minutes later, I looked up and told him that he had a customer because there was a man standing at the front. He looked a bit messed up, not dirty or anything, just a bit like he was stressing out. He was wearing a nicer button-down shirt and a decent pair of pants, but they were, for lack of a better way to put it, messed up. Like, his shirt was halfway unbuttoned, his tie was still tied around his neck, but was halfway unknotted. His pants were unbuttoned, but his belt was holding them up, and his hair looked like he had been pulling it out. He looked like a VP for a company that had just closed its doors for the last time, if that makes sense. The man just stood there at the counter, looking at nothing in particular, like he was just spacing out. Kevin asked him if he could take the man's order, and the man just stared at him with that same blank expression. The man just kept his eyes focused on Kevin, not saying a word. After a few moments of staring and Kevin trying to get him to say anything, waving his hand in front of his face and looking back at me like, is this guy okay? The guy just screams, "Hey!" straight at Kevin. He jumps, I jump, and we are both now paying full attention to this guy. At this point, our manager Sasha is actually coming out of the office room to see what exactly is going on. And as soon as she does, this man starts screaming at her, yelling that, in his words, she was one with Satan, and that she was an affront to the Holy Father. We both turned to look at her. She had a confused look on her face, and yeah, it was weird. Then, as we weren't paying attention to the guy, he reached forward and grabbed Kevin's shirt and pulled him close, And at this point, I ran up to the front to try and get this guy away from him. I was sitting there trying to push this man off, and he's sitting there staring at Kevin with his whole face shaking, and then starts saying, "They're coming, Kevin. This is the end. This is how all things end." Considering how much he was shaking aggressively, his voice was surprisingly calm and direct. He started pretty much trying to pull Kevin over the counter, and I was struggling to get this guy off of Kevin. Thankfully, Sasha was already in the back and calling the police. As I'm trying to pry the man off Kevin, he began shouting about how they were here and we needed to leave. Thankfully, the police arrived damn near immediately. My guess is that they were probably already patrolling and waiting for something to happen. They managed to restrain the man with the 2 officers and get his hands in cuffs. As they led him away, he continued to rant about some impending doom. The whole ordeal was over in a matter of minutes, but we were all in a pretty confused state of panic. After the police left, we all tried to get back to work, and when Kevin went to clean the restrooms, he found a weird symbol that was scratched into the wall. Not the stall, but the actual paint on the drywall. The only way I can describe it is like a summoning circle from Supernatural. Obviously, we have no idea why he carved it into the wall before going psycho on Kevin, but at least we knew what he was doing between the time he walked in and we saw him. Obviously, this left us all a bit shaken, but we went back to just doing our mundane jobs until our shifts were over. Kevin did end up putting his 2 weeks in not too long after, and he just had his last shift. He said that he didn't really want to quit, but he keeps getting this weird feeling that the guy is going to come back and it's been bothering him enough to leave. I get it, and I don't blame him. It was definitely a terrifying moment, and the fact that this guy paid way more attention to Kevin probably didn't help. So that, my friends, was another scary story collection. Kind of a different mix of not good people in this mix, but well, maybe not for the fast food guy. I wouldn't necessarily, definitely creepy. Would not know how to handle that either. I would probably just cry. But maybe there was a little more going on with that man. But anyways, if you did enjoy this video, please do give it a like below. And if you'd like to hear more content like this, consider subscribing. And lastly, don't forget to leave a comment on your thoughts, or let me know what's been going on for you. The weather has cooled down significantly. Well, significantly, I'm a little dramatic because 70 feels a lot better than 80 to me, but still, it's been really nice, and we've been able to walk more and play Pokemon Go, which has been it's a lot nicer and manageable than walking when it's 80, 90 degrees and humid. So I am definitely enjoying it. Hopefully it stays cooler and gets cooler, and we can keep doing that. How about you? Is it cooler over where you are? Are you ready for autumn? Anybody in school about to go back to school? Have kids that are about to go back to school? It's already August. It's crazy. Where has this year gone? Oh, well, with that being said, friends, I hope you have a fantastic week and a good rest of your day. And until next time, take care.